I never meant for those words to leave my mouth. They just slipped out, like the kind of thing you only say when you're standing too close to someone you shouldn't be near in the first place. It started in the quietest corner of a place that smelled like dust, ink, and coffee left sitting too long. A used bookstore, tucked between a laundromat and a shuttered diner. I'd stopped in because I was early for a shift and wanted somewhere to kill an hour. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a distraction. She was the one who made the air different. I noticed her before I meant to, a woman in her 40s, maybe mid-40s, moving through the shelves like she'd walked them 100 times before. She wasn't browsing so much as handling the books, brushing dust off spines, setting one upright where it leaned. Her confidence wasn't loud. It was quieter, the kind that made everyone else in the room straighten a little without realizing. I tried not to stare, but I caught myself doing it anyway. Something about the way she touched things, not delicately, but with a kind of certainty, made me want to watch. When our paths crossed between shelves, it was stupidly ordinary. I reached for a book just as she slid it back. Her hand brushed mine, cool from the air outside. "Sorry," she said. Her voice was low, even, and it lingered in my head longer than the touch. "It's fine." I swallowed harder than I should have. She didn't move away immediately. For half a second, maybe more, her eyes held mine. They weren't warm, exactly, more like steady, like she could see right through the little nerves and excuses I carried around. That's when she said it. "Don't come closer." Not harsh, not cruel, just measured. A line drawn in the air, invisible but sharp. And because I was 20-something and too restless for my own good, I said the thing I shouldn't have. "Then pull me away yourself." I don't know what I expected, maybe a laugh, maybe nothing. But the way her lips parted, like the words had actually unsettled her for a second, lodged itself in me. She looked away first, sliding another book into its place as if it demanded her full attention. The silence stretched. I should have left it alone, but my chest felt too tight, like the space between us had become something physical. A minute later, she pushed a book into my hands. Not the one I'd been reaching for, not even one I recognized. Just something she'd picked without asking. "You'll like this one," she said. No smile, no explanation. Then she walked past me, her shoulder brushing mine just slightly. Not enough to call it an accident, not enough to claim it wasn't. I stood there with the book in my hands, the title forgotten the second I looked at it, because all I could think about was the steadiness in her voice and the way it cracked just slightly when I challenged her. That moment followed me out of the shop, into the night air, through my shift, and long after. The sentence kept replaying, like static under everything else. "Don't come closer. Then pull me away yourself." And even now, I can't stop wondering why she didn't. The second time I saw her, it wasn't by accident. I'd gone back to the bookstore a week later, telling myself it was about the books, about the quiet. But when I walked in and caught sight of her behind the counter, arranging a crooked stack like it mattered more than anything else in the world, I knew better. She didn't look surprised to see me, but she didn't exactly look pleased either. Her expression was unreadable, steady as always, like a mask fitted too perfectly to slip. "You're back," she said, voice even, eyes already moving past me. Guess I forgot to finish browsing. I tried to sound casual. She didn't answer, just slid the stack into a neater row and brushed dust off her palms. Her hands caught me, the way they worked without hesitation, but lingered on the edge of stillness when she thought no one noticed. Slim fingers, a small silver ring she never seemed to take off. I offered to help her with the boxes stacked near the door, heavier than they looked. She hesitated just a fraction before nodding, like saying yes was a risk she hadn't calculated yet. Carrying them wasn't the point. It was the way she stood aside, arms crossed, watching me with that quiet, assessing look. Like she was weighing not whether I could lift a box, but whether I had any business lifting it for her. When I set the last one down, she murmured, "Thanks," softer than the first time I'd heard her voice. Almost reluctant. "You always do this alone?" I asked. Her laugh, brief, small, almost swallowed before it escaped, made something stir in me. "Most people don't notice," she said, "or they assume I prefer it that way." "And do you?" The question hung there longer than I meant. She didn't answer. She just smoothed her hair back, tucking a strand behind her ear, her gaze flickering away like I'd pressed on a bruise. That was the first glimpse I had of something beneath her composure. Not weakness, not exactly, but fatigue. The kind that hides in the corners of someone's eyes when they think no one's paying attention. I caught myself staring too long. Sorry, I muttered. She tilted her head, almost smiling, not with her mouth, but with the faintest softening at the edges of her face. For what? I didn't have an answer, so I stayed quiet. The shop grew still around us, the hum of the old ceiling fan the only sound. She reached for one of the books on the counter, then stopped halfway, her hand hovering. Not indecision exactly, more like she was holding something back. For a moment, neither of us moved. The silence pressed close, thick with something I couldn't name. And when she finally did pick up the book, her fingers brushed the edge of mine. Deliberate or accidental, I couldn't tell. But the touch lingered longer in me than it should have. It was raining the third time. The kind of rain that blurred windows and made the street lamps look like smudged halos. I ducked into the shop, dripping from the shoulders down, and found her already closing up. "You'll ruin the floors," she said, but she didn't tell me to leave. I offered to help with the shutters, and for some reason, she let me. We worked in near darkness, the sound of rain thick around us. Every time the metal groaned as I pulled it down, her shoulder brushed mine in the narrow space. Too brief to matter. Too much to ignore. When the last shutter locked, the store felt sealed in, like the outside world had been pressed mute. She made tea. I don't know if it was for me or for herself, but she handed me a chipped mug without looking. Her hair was damp at the edges, strands clinging to her cheek. "You don't have to stay," she said. "I don't mind the rain." That got me the smallest smile, hidden behind her mug. We sat among the books, the shop dim except for one lamp on the counter. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full, with everything unsaid, with every glance I tried not to make obvious. At one point, she leaned back in her chair, sighing in a way that belonged more to exhaustion than relief. I wanted to ask what weighed on her, but the words snagged in my throat. Instead, she spoke. "People think owning a place like this is romantic. Quiet. Peaceful." She let out a breath. "Mostly, it's just lonely." Her voice broke on that last word, just slightly, and I felt it in my chest. I wanted to answer, to tell her she wasn't as invisible as she thought, that I noticed her laugh, her tired eyes, the way she touched things like they might break. But I didn't, because saying it out loud would have changed everything. Before I could find something safer to say, her phone buzzed on the counter. The name on the screen lit up for half a second. Daniel. She froze. Didn't answer. Just turned it face down and wrapped both hands around her mug, holding it too tightly. The silence after that was different. Heavier. I shifted in my seat, words threatening to spill out. "Who is he? Are you waiting for him? Are you still his?" Instead, I asked nothing. Because the truth of it was, I was afraid of the answer. She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes softer, unguarded for once, as if she wanted to explain and couldn't. The rain thrashed harder against the windows. My hand was on the table, inches from hers. The space between us tightened into something electric, unbearable. Her fingers twitched like she might reach for mine. And then, nothing. She stood, too quickly, collecting the mugs. "It's late," she said, not looking back. But I can still feel that moment, like a breath caught between us, suspended and unfinished. The storm had passed by the next time I saw her. The air outside was clear, washed clean, but inside the shop everything felt heavier. Like the rain had left something behind that hadn't dried. She was at the counter, sorting receipts, her movements sharper than usual. I stood there longer than I should have before speaking. "You could at least say hello." Her head lifted, her eyes steady but unreadable. "Hello," she said flatly, and went back to her papers. It was the kind of dismissal I should have accepted. But I didn't move. My feet stayed rooted. "Are we just going to keep pretending?" The words came out before I'd planned them, low and uneven. Her hand stilled. The paper crumpled slightly beneath her fingers. "Pretending what? That this is normal. That we're just what? Acquaintances? Strangers who talk too much." The silence after that was unbearable. The ceiling fan hummed. A page turned somewhere in the back of the store, but between us, nothing. Finally, she set the paper down and looked at me. Really looked. Her gaze was unflinching, but her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "You're young," she said. "Too young to understand that some things shouldn't happen." That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. I wanted to step closer, to close the distance that had been taunting us for weeks, but I forced myself still. My chest ached with restraint. She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms like she needed the barrier. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I'm not asking for anything." My voice cracked, betraying me. I stopped, pressing my hand against the wood of the counter, grounding myself. "I just don't know what this is anymore." Her eyes softened then, just for a second, like the fight drained out of her. We stood there, the space between us tight with words neither of us dared to say. "You make things complicated," she whispered finally. "Maybe they were already complicated," I whispered back. The silence stretched again, this time heavier, like it had weight pressing down on both of us. She turned her face away, her jaw trembling once before she hit it. "What are we doing?" The question wasn't sharp. It wasn't even meant for me, not really. It was a confession slipped into the open air. And for the first time, she let herself stand still in it. No defenses, no half-smile to cover it. Just the truth hanging raw between us. I wanted to answer her, to give her something that made sense. But all I could manage was the truth sitting in my chest, heavy as stone. "I don't know how to stop thinking about you." Her eyes closed at that, like the words hurt more than they should have. And the silence that followed was worse than any touch. The shift didn't arrive in a shout or a sudden gesture. It came quietly, the way light fades without you noticing until the room is already dark. I found her one evening sitting on the floor behind the counter, her back against the shelves, papers spread across her lap. For a moment, she looked smaller, the confidence I'd grown used to stripped away. "You shouldn't sneak up like that," she said without looking, though her voice lacked its usual steadiness. I wasn't sneaking. She finally glanced up. Her eyes were tired, rimmed with something more than sleeplessness. She held a thin envelope in her hand, folded open but unread. "You okay?" I asked carefully. Her laugh was short, bitter, nothing like the soft sound I'd heard before. "No one ever is, really." She set the letter aside, like it weighed too much. "It's from him." I didn't need to ask who him was. The name on the phone, the shadow in her silence. Daniel. She didn't offer details, but she didn't need to. The air was already heavy with whatever he had written. I stayed quiet, waiting. Finally, she spoke, her eyes fixed on the far wall. "He was supposed to be forever. We built a life, or at least I thought we did. And then one day he decided it wasn't enough. That I wasn't enough." Her voice caught, just slightly, like she hadn't said it out loud before. The confession sat between us, raw, unpolished. I swallowed, not trusting myself to respond. The urge to reach for her, to erase the distance, nearly tore me in half. But I stayed still, my hand pressed to my knee until my nails bit in. "You remind me of him sometimes," she said suddenly. Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp and searching, as if she regretted the words the moment they left her mouth. I froze. "That's good." Her expression shifted, almost a smile, but one laced with pain. "No, that's why it's dangerous." The air thickened. My chest ached with things I couldn't untangle. Jealousy for a man I'd never met. Shame for wanting to take his place. Something hotter I didn't want to name. She picked up the letter again, folded it carefully, and slipped it back into the envelope as if sealing it shut could undo the weight inside. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her gaze dropping. "This isn't your burden." But it already was. Every word she gave me carved deeper, tied me closer to something I didn't know how to step away from. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't afraid of her ghosts, that her past didn't scare me half as much as the thought of walking away from her did. But I didn't. Instead, I just nodded, though the words tore through me unspoken. And when she finally looked up, her eyes glistening in the dim light, she whispered, not to me, not even to herself, but to the space between us, "I don't know if I can survive losing someone again." The sound of it left me shaken, more than any touch could have. I found her in the back room, where the old armchair had settled into its own quiet corner. The sun was low, painting the walls gold, dust motes drifting like tiny sparks. She looked smaller than usual, curled into herself, but there was no pretense this time, no careful mask of composure. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She knew I was there. She always knew. After a while, she tilted her head, letting her eyes meet mine without a trace of defense. "You didn't have to come back," she said softly. "I wanted to," I said. Not a confession, not a declaration, just truth. She let that hang, her fingers brushing the worn fabric of the armchair, slow, deliberate. I stepped closer, the space between us shrinking until it was almost unbearable. I don't usually let people in," she admitted. Her voice wavered, but not in panic, more like recognition. Like finally saying it aloud made it real. "I know," I said, and it was enough. We didn't rush. No words of love, no promises. Just the quiet acknowledgement that whatever this was, it had grown past caution, past rules, past fear. I watched her hands, how they flexed, how the ring she never removed caught the sunlight. Without thinking, I reached out. My fingers grazed hers, light, tentative, testing. She didn't pull away. Not immediately. Just let the touch linger, the space between us charged but gentle. She leaned back, exhaling, and the tension folded out of her shoulders. I sat across from her in the chair, careful not to crowd, careful to let her choose the pace. We didn't speak, but the room hummed with understanding. The clock ticked somewhere behind the bookshelves, the only sound besides our breaths. It wasn't dramatic, not cinematic, not a surge of passion. It was stillness, acknowledgement, intimacy earned in the small acts. A hand held a moment too long, a shared glance that lasted too many seconds, a quiet acceptance that we didn't need to label it to feel it. At one point, she shifted, letting her forehead rest lightly against my shoulder. I tensed, half afraid she'd withdraw, but she stayed. And I stayed with her, the weight of her presence grounding me more than I realized I needed. Outside, the world carried on, indifferent, rushing, noisy. Inside, there was only this, the small, fragile, unspoken recognition of each other. We could have said 100 things, but the moment didn't need words. It only needed us. And when she finally pulled back just enough to look at me, there was a quietness in her gaze that matched mine. No declarations, no grand gestures. Just the truth of being here, together, in the same room, choosing the same breath, letting what had been slow and complicated settle into a fragile certainty. Her fingers twined with mine, neither of us pushing, neither of us pulling, just staying. And for the first time, the ache of longing, the shadows of past mistakes, the tremor of shame, all of it softened into something steady, earned, and enough. It's strange how some moments feel permanent, even when they're fleeting. I find myself thinking back to her sometimes, not with longing or ache, but with a quiet sort of gratitude. I've changed, I think. Or maybe I've just noticed myself differently, more patient, more aware of the small things, the spaces between words and glances. I don't try to rush life the way I used to, not with her in mind, and not even without her. She had a way of showing me that some things, some connections, aren't about urgency. They're about attention. She's changed too, I know. I can't claim to see all of it, but I see enough. How she tilts her head when she's considering someone. How she laughs now in places she used to only sigh. How the light catches her eyes differently than before. Something loosened in her, a guard she didn't even realize she was holding up until she didn't have to anymore. Love, I've learned, isn't a rush. It isn't the fireworks you see in movies or the grand confessions that hang in the air like a storm. It's quiet, patient. Sometimes it's simply being there, across a table, brushing against someone's hand, holding space without expectation. I remember the rainy nights, the small silences that spoke louder than words, the letters she never sent, the moments where we almost fell apart, all of it stitched together, fragile and imperfect. And now, it's in the way I carry those memories with me, steady, like a lantern lighting the path I didn't know I needed. She taught me that intimacy isn't only physical. It's the unspoken agreements we make with people we care about, the trust we extend even when it's terrifying, the patience to let something grow on its own. And in return, she let me show her that someone could notice the tiny details and still respect the space she needed. Sometimes I still see her across the street or in the corner of a bookstore, and I feel that familiar pulse, the one that says, "This was worth it." But it's no longer sharp, no longer a need pressing against my chest. It's calm, warm, a reminder that some connections don't demand a name. They simply exist, quietly, profoundly. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe we'll meet again in some ordinary place, over ordinary books, with ordinary lives. Maybe not. But the truth is, it doesn't matter. The story we wrote in silences, in pauses, in gestures too small to notice at first glance, that stays. And if you've ever felt the weight of something unspoken, or the pull of someone you shouldn't, I hope you know you're not alone. Sometimes the heart learns lessons quietly, in ways you never see coming. So, wherever you are, whoever you are, take note of the small moments, the glances, the pauses, the words left unsaid, because they carry more than you realize. And maybe, just maybe, one day you'll find yourself brushing fingers with someone, in silence, and understand exactly what I mean.